my latest EP, Homeward, produced by Greg Ashley. It's still available to stream and purchase digitally and on cassette. Still got cassettes left. They're running out. You can find that and more of my music on iTunes, Spotify, and Bandcamp.com, not to mention on my website, mark-nelsen.com. Nelson spelled N-E-L-S-E-N. Fuck you, autocorrect. Yeah, there you can find all my solo and band music and music news.
Checking in with Mark Nelsen.
Can you hear everything? Yeah. Oh! Test, 1, 2, check.
Checking with Mark Nelsen.
Why, hello. Welcome back. Yeah, welcome back. Good to see you again. Good to hear you again. Maybe good to hear me again. I don't know. Here we are at episode 15. Okay, I don't usually do introductions on this show, as you may have noticed. But this time it's necessary because I have a lot of shameless plugging to do for myself. Good God. I'm sorry. Yes, mamas and sirs, lots of stuff coming up this month. Oh boy. This is Mark Nelsen. I'm alone here in the break room getting ready to leave the hotel and go talk to Greg Ashley. Got to drive back to his recording studio in Oakland. He's not staying at the hotel tonight. His recording studio, though, has everything to do with today's episode and what's coming up. It was a great talk, it really was, and I'm excited to share it with you. We'll get to that in a second. First, the plugs. Okay, my new EP, Homeward, will be available on cassette and digital download on July 1st. Greg did produce it, and he played on the record. We talk a little bit about that on this episode. You can catch me and my band celebrating Homeward's release with 2 distinct live shows. One will be an intimate, more acoustic performance at the Vortex Room on July 5th, and the other will be a raunchier, heavier, more rock and roll performance at the Milk Bar on July 9th. Yes. Okay, July 5th will be a one-time special performance where we'll be premiering the new music video for the song Homeward, which is directed by Andrew Hurwitz. And the band will be performing the EP live in sequence, in its entirety. Now, I've never done a performance like this, so I'm pretty interested to see what will happen. Opening support will include Nate Porter and my good friend Justine Lucas. The show will be co-presented by Smile and In the Fade. July 9th will be a night of mad rock and roll, because it's the second night of Down Dirty Shake's second annual Milk Bar residency, co-presented by Inner Light and Mac Walker. I'll be sharing the bill with Silent Pictures, Lemmy Adams, and of course, Down Dirty Shake. Oh, July 9th is also my tour kickoff show. Because yes, I will be on the road completely solo, touring and supporting Homeward. And what do you know? I'll be checking myself out of the hotel just to do this. Yes, a special on-the-road version of Checking In podcast called Checking Out. My tour is going to take me all the way up the coast to Seattle and back, and I'll be interviewing some of the finest Northwestern musicians along the way, who I'll be playing shows, jamming, and staying with. Some key dates to look out for, if any of you are listening in these areas. July 14th at the White Eagle in Portland, and July 17th at the Blue Moon Bar in Seattle. I'm super stoked for all this, so stay the fuck tuned, okay? All right, so back to Greg. A little background for you, then I'll shut up, mostly. Many years ago, Greg Ashley founded the seminal psychedelic bands Gris Gris and The Mirrors. Many Bay Area dwellers, myself included, miss these bands dearly. He's a remarkable solo artist who's come out with a remarkable new album. I discovered Greg's music when I was about 18, I think, and I used to perform his songs at open mics, which was around the time I was getting my feet wet as a solo performer. This was still before I met him. I adore his songs, but more importantly, I adore his albums and the freshness they brought to the Bay Area scene. They brought an edge to the scene. I'm still getting to know Greg. I think this is our first extended conversation. Yeah, sounds about right. I see Greg as the musical love child of Rocky Erickson and Leonard Cohen. His songs and lyrics are mysterious, they're tender, loving, haunting, truthful, and precious. So listen closely. Without further ado, let's talk to Greg Ashley.
And I moved west from the East Texas plain to chase girls from the far eastern world. And the highway was a dancer on her back that spread her legs just to guide me down the track. But who controls the sex now anyway? Pointless as a match struck in the rain. Is this the end of the world? Is this the end?
All right. Welcome back to Checking In with Mark Nelson. Today I have a very special guest. I'm very thrilled and immensely stoked to finally get to talk to him on record and ask him a bunch of questions that I've always wanted to ask him. We are at the CREAMERY Recording Studio in Oakland, California. And my guest today is the one and only Greg Ashley. Welcome, man. How you doing?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
This is where Greg has been producing and engineering records on analog tape exclusively for, I guess, since 2007?
Yeah. So I moved in here to this room that we're in, which is now the control room, in September of 2007. My solo record, Painted Garden, came out at the beginning of that year. And then I went on a tour for it. I think I might have done 2 tours, one with a band, one by myself. At the end of all that, I didn't have a place to live, and I still had the band Gris Gris, and I had put all my stuff in storage, and I was homeless, and I needed a place to live, and a guy that I knew, Chris Stroffolino, he lived here. He told me he could get me a room, which was this room, which I just kind of lucked into because the other room, which is pretty much the studio, wasn't included. It was just a room full of garbage that you had to walk through to get to the bedroom here. And yeah, so I moved in here. I was living here, and it was a place where I knew that Gris Gris could practice. We could work on this record. There used to be a practice space downstairs. And over the course of a few months, between September and December of 2007, I slowly moved all the trash out of that room and started making it my recording studio. And then at some point later in that year, the band broke up. We never finished that record, and I started recording bands in here. And I always wanted to do a recording studio more seriously than I had in the past, and not having that band anymore, it was just like, okay, this is the next thing I'm going to do. And I upgraded to a 16-track 1-inch machine from my 8-track half-inch machine, and I just started recording bands here and living here, and I got enough work, and it just kind of worked out.
Nice. Yeah, so this is the Creamery. Have you called it the Creamery? This is...
Yeah, the building, it was a creamery. That's what it was built for. I think it was a creamery all through the 1930s, and then it was a bunch of different things over the years. It was a book depository. It had something to do with the Black Panthers at one point in the 70s.
Okay.
If you watch that Sun Ra movie, is it Space is the Place? The one of the shots in the film is of the front of this building. You can see the pillars there. They're driving past in a car, and you can see that corner by the liquor store up there, but it's a different store. Everything looks a lot different, but this building looks the same in the movie.
That's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Cool. I think I've heard of that movie. I think my friend Daniel told me about that movie.
Yeah. It's pretty wacky. I don't know. If you like Sun Ra, it's something to check out.
Sweet. Yeah, and this is also, I mean, right now, so you lived here. I mean, you're not living here anymore. You recently moved out.
Yeah, I moved out around Thanksgiving of 2013. And so now the bedroom is just solely the control room.
B.B. King tracked here at some point or another?
Yeah, there's a bunch of people that...
Like had studios in the past?
Yeah, I think that's a bunch of bullshit. I think people that live... Like, I've heard stories that James Brown recorded here and stuff in the 70s. I haven't heard the B.B. King thing, but, I mean, I'd never heard of this place being used for that. And also, why would people at the top of their careers record in a fucking dump like this? I mean, it just doesn't make any sense, But they would have been at the top of the line studios in Oakland, and if this place had been used as a very high end studio, we would all know about it. Yeah, so that's what I figure. Like, is that didn't happen because,
Would you say you're one of the few exclusive analog tape studios in the Bay Area?
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know about anybody else.
What drew you to want to do just tape?
Well, I started recording myself just as soon as I had a band, and this would have been, the mid-'90s, and I was hearing recordings of other friends of mine who had bands that went to, studios around Houston, or maybe they had friends that went to the community college there where there was some recording equipment, somebody was taking an audio class or something. And I just never liked the way that any of it was sounding. And, I mean, I didn't own my own computer until 2007 when I moved in here. I had girlfriends that had computers, so I would use their computers. But yeah, it was just, I mean, back in the 90s, I didn't have a computer, and I don't know what the situation with computer recording was back then, but it was. I mean, I started off with a cassette 4-track. That was what was prevalent. If you were making music and you had to record yourself, people didn't have laptops with Pro Tools on them back then. I mean, people were still using dial-up with AOL and stuff, Yeah. So that was what I got, and then in '99, I had my band, The Mirrors, and we wanted to, I had all these songs, and we wanted to record a record to actually, come out and be pressed on vinyl and whatnot. And so me and the drummer bought that 8-track machine there off eBay for, I don't know, $500 or something. We went halves on it, and we recorded the record on that, and I used that up until 2007. And it was just, I figured out how to use it, and so it didn't make any sense to use anything else because I figured out that thing and it sounded good. And also, the drummer, his aunt lived in Chicago, and she worked for Shure, and she sent us a box of preamps and microphones, which are most of the microphones I still use to this day.
Cool.
Right when we bought that machine, because she was a mic tester, so she just got all this stuff that was I guess, essentially free, and it was just laying around or something. I don't really know the full story behind it. Mm-hmm. All I know is a box full of microphones and preamps showed up, and Tom brought them over, and we just started figuring out that machine. Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty much it. I mean, there was just there wasn't really a choice to not use tape. It was just what made sense. And then I just continued on with it.
Well, tape sounds the best.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. Tape. I mean, the thing about it is tape is really tape and records and analog stuff I think is really effective for certain things, and definitely rock music, and just or just in a broader sense, pop music that is vocals and 3-minute songs, and it's tape works really well for that, because there's not an incredible amount of dynamics in it, and the natural compression that the tape gives you is pretty forgiving, whereas on a computer, if you go into the red with whatever you're doing, you get this crunchy, shitty, distortion. Whereas if you go into the red on tape, you got to go pretty far before you get a distortion that is unnatural sounding.
For sure.
I think that for reproducing things that have already been recorded on tape, digital is really good. That's why I just mix straight to a computer now. I used to mix to a reel-to-reel 2-track, and then I would dump that onto a computer, but it was just kind of like didn't make sense to have the middleman in there after a while. But yeah, it's digital is good at just giving you back exactly what you already recorded. And I think it's probably better for things like classical music, things where you get extremely quiet and extremely loud things. If you try to do really quiet stuff on tape, you get that tape hiss that's there. And same with an LP. If you listen to classical music on an LP, the quiet sections are you hear the needle. Whereas on digital recordings, they can keep the dynamics really pure without a lot of background noise. Yeah,
man.
Yeah, I don't want to over manipulate what somebody sounds like as a live band.
What are some of your favorite records that you've produced here, or standout records? And
one of them was this band Zoo Bombs from Japan. I think they used about half the stuff they recorded here. I think they re-recorded the other half in Japan. And one of their songs is actually it's called My Big Friend, and that's the song that I use their music for the Awkward Affection, that you make me feel like shit, I want to kill myself.
Oh.
That's their song, but I rewrote the lyrics and re-recorded it. Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
You make me feel like shit. You make me feel like shit. I wanna kill myself. I wanna kill myself. You make me feel like shit. I wanna kill myself. I wanna kill myself.
So yeah, they were great. They were really interesting to work with. This guy Wes Coleman from Austin. I did one of his records here that I still listen to and I love.
It was a pleasure to get to work with you on my new EP that's taken me like about a year and a half to get done. I wanted to make it here. I wanted to do it here specifically because I've been wanting to track on analog tape for a long time, and I've always respected your work. It was a thrill for me and everybody who worked on my record to get to work with you. So,
thank you.
Yeah,
feeling is mutual.
Well, he produced the record, and we collaborated on ideas, but I wanted to do this experimental song called Penultimate.
Yeah, I remember the main thing I remember thinking, because I've been getting really into. You heard that David Bowie record, "Low"?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember like thinking when you laid down the drum track, and it was I was like, oh, I want this to sound like that record, with that like mechanical drum thing, which I think we kind of got going with that, and I don't know, I was just like, I want to make this a fucked up David Bowie low track.
Awesome.
That was pretty much what.
Yeah, no, and the result was sweet because we just need to take this to another dimension by the end of it, and
I think we did some sort of delay manipulation that kind of took off.
Because those kinds of effects, I'm just so used to just like digital. Not that shit sounds so bad, but I mean, it's just like it's kind of a.
Yeah, I think
there's no performance behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I think is always what's cool about using tape is nothing can be programmed. Everything has to be done live. And even though I mix onto a computer, I'm mixing analog because I'm mixing in real time.
Yeah. Through
a mixing board, it's just. The computer is catching the two tracks as they happen, but yeah, that's what's so cool about fucking with tape and all that stuff is that you may not get exactly what you had envisioned in your mind would come out of it, but you get something special that can never be recreated. Whereas with a computer, you can manipulate all day and get exactly what you think or you thought you wanted by adding effects or messing around with things, but you can also do the same thing with effects units in a mixing board and doing it live, and you never get to that state of perfection of what you had imagined, but you get something different that sometimes is even more beautiful and special and is also like completely cannot be recreated ever again, so
Absolutely.
it's almost cooler,
Yeah, and I don't think the song could have worked any other way. Let's build this tower of noises and ideas, and I want you to just collapse it, just tear it apart and just blow it up, just like. So yeah, that's coming out soon. My newest solo EP entitled "Homeward," produced by Greg Ashley. All right, so let's go back. Let's talk about you.
Okay.
The funnest topic for everybody.
Save the West, kill all the rest of having fun. Better God who drove the Jeep down a
You're from Texas originally?
Yeah, I grew up in Houston, League City, which is near the Space Center. It's half hour south of Houston. My dad worked for NASA, so that's how.
Oh shit! Get
that's
out
how,
of here.
That's how my family ended up there.
Huh?
This is a couple years ago. I remember talking to my dad, and he was talking about when he first took the job at NASA. He already lived in Houston, and they had told him you can choose between staying here at the Space Center or you can take a position in San Jose. And my dad was like, he said, "Oh, stay here because the cost of living is so much cheaper." And even though they're going to pay him a little bit more, he didn't think it would offset that. And my parents owned a couple houses in League City around there, which they rented for years, and then they ended up selling, in the past 5 or 10 years. Most of which they sold after the housing market went to shit. And I remember when he told me that, I was like thinking, well, if you had taken the job in San Jose, I would have not only gotten to grow up essentially in the Bay Area where I ended up, which would have been much nicer, but if you had bought houses around here and kept them until now, you would be millionaires a couple times over.
Yeah, man. Yeah. That's right, yeah.
You are not millionaires a couple times over by selling the houses you you bought in the Houston area. So maybe
Holy
it wasn't
shit.
the wisest decision to
Oh,
not
man.
take the San Jose job. But
So, what compelled you to come out to SF the time you did? And, well, I guess first I want to ask, was there anybody musical in your family? Or was it just friends that kind of inspired you to start playing music, writing songs?
yeah, it was. Yeah, my sister played flute a little bit in middle school. Neither of my parents played an instrument or were musical at all. But I have cousins and aunts and uncles that, like one of my uncle Bob, he did a bunch of sound engineering. He would be a consultant when people were building, churches or stadiums on what to do to make the sound the best. And he designed speaker cabinets. I ended up with some speaker cabinet he had designed for Moog or Moog or whatever.
Huh.
But yeah, nobody in my, and these are kind of distant relatives I barely ever saw. Nobody in my family was musical. Just about when I was 12 when I was 12, Nirvana started coming on the radio, and then I wanted to learn how to play guitar, and be Kurt Cobain, and so that was what did it for me. And then when I got into high school, I had this one friend Bob who was a drummer in Gris Gris for the second record, and he did a few tours, and not a great drummer, but a good friend. And anyways, he somehow he turned me and all my friends on to a bunch of the garage music that was from the San Francisco Bay Area, like the Phantom Surfers, and the Mummies, and Supercharger. He was getting those Estrus catalogs, and this is like pre-internet, so we'd have to, you'd mail off for these things, and then we'd randomly buy records from these bands. And I was really into the music from the San Francisco garage scene when I was in high school. So that stuff was a big deal and for me, and definitely shaped the music that I ended up doing with the bands I was in, and just the aesthetic of the sound of that stuff
for sure.
was warped my mind as a adolescent. But I ended up out here kind of because my band, the Mirrors, in 2001 in the summer that year, we did a tour that was from Texas. I think I remember. Okay, so I remember we left Houston, we played Dallas, then we played Denver, played Missoula, Montana or something, and then we some of our friends had moved to the Seattle area. A friend of mine, Vikram, he was in the band with that guy Bob who had moved to Seattle, and they had a band called Vegetable F, and they were also called The Illnesses, which is actually what that band The Infections that Greg Lowry had, they ripped off the name from them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which is another weird story. But so they had moved to Seattle, and Vikram, he's at this point he was a few years older than me. He would get and lose a job every week. He probably had 300 jobs by the time he was 23 or 24. And he moved up there with those guys. He was the guitar player in the band. Bob played guitar, and then my friend Roadhouse brother played bass. Our friend Trevor played the drums. And anyways, Vikram, just in normal style that he does, he randomly went to a show that the Rock and Roll Adventure Kids played.
Okay.
And this is before anybody knew any of those people, And Oscar and Vikram really hit it off. And so Vikram just decided not to go to work the next day. He decided to go on tour with Oscar.
Okay.
And so he just drove around with them for a few days or a week or whatever, and they partied together. And so when we were doing this tour, Vikram called Oscar, and he was like, "Oh, my friend's band needs a gig in the Bay Area." And Oscar was either living at or he was doing some sort of management stuff at the co-ops in Berkeley. And so he got us a gig at Cloyne, which is one of the co-ops there. And and that's how I met him, was through, Vikram's being a scumbag and not caring whatever. So then I met Oscar that night when we played that show, and I met this girl, Lisa, who I fell in love with, and I moved out here for. And I lived with her for, years or whatever. And then that band started with Oscar accidentally because I ended up out here for her. And then Oscar's a bass player, and he liked my music. And so, I didn't want to have another band when I moved out here. I just wanted to do solo stuff because it's a big pain in the ass to deal with being in a band. But yeah, he's like, I'll play bass for you. And I was like, okay. And then Joe is the drummer in Rock and Roll Adventure Kids. Oscar, he's like, we should get a drummer. We should have Joe play drums. So then that became the Gris Gris, accidentally.
Okay.
And then also randomly, Lars was Oscar's roommate. And I went over there one day and saw that there was an electric piano in their house. And I asked him who played this. And Lars said that his dad had just given it to him. He hadn't played piano in 10 or 15 years, but he played when he was a kid. And he still knew how to play, and he was great. So then he became the keyboard player, and it just all was a random set of events that fell together to kind of get me out here and make that band a thing. I think I remember. I think I played in Berkeley on August 5th, and I remember I was 20 years old, and I was at this co-op, and there's all these kids that were really into this kind of music, and people in Houston weren't into that kind of music, at least not on a scale where you could get that many people together in the same place. You know, it was, and I remember it just being like sunny, 70 degrees. They rolled a keg out into the yard in the middle of summer. I mean, it's 110 in Texas at this point. And I just thought, wow, this is, and then I got laid that night and fell in love with this girl. So it was, it was like, wow, everybody's into this music. I met a woman, and you can have a keg uniced out in a yard in the middle of the summer, and it's not miserable. It's just everything was. I moved here, I think 6 months after that or something. I moved here in April of 2002.
Your Medicine Fuck Dream album, your solo debut, that was cut before you came out here?
Yeah, I recorded all of that. Well, it was all recorded pretty much. Well, it was all recorded after that tour, but before I moved here.
All pre-Gris Gris. Pre-Gris Gris.
Right, yeah, pre-Gris.
And you just celebrated the 10-year anniversary of that record?
Oh, yeah.
You remastered it and re-released it, sort of?
Yeah. On the internet.
Yeah,
I don't know.
But you added some
one
tracks.
guy bought it.
you added some tracks, like some new mixes or whatever?
Yeah, I don't remember what I was doing, but I was digging around for something else, and I found the tapes of it. And that record, I was never totally satisfied with how it was mastered in any sense. It had been dumped to a cassette, but that was that was what was used as the master, essentially what came off the cassette. And then when maybe a year later, well, then there's a whole story about the CD came out. My mom told all her friends, that her son had this solo record coming out, and I didn't tell her what it was called. And one of her friends Googled me and called my mom and told her what it was being called. And she wasn't very pleased that that the word "fuck" was in it, and she's an old lady and all that stuff. And she was kind of pissed that now her friends knew this, and she had been bragging about her son and all this. And anyway, so she had called me a bunch of times. I didn't answer the phone because I didn't want to deal with it. And so she wrote me a letter, which the letter is included in the LP, which came out years later, which is hilarious. She writes it in the third person. It's seems like it's written by my dad or something, but it's not. It's signed Mom and Dad, both by her. I don't think my dad gave a fuck, but anyway, so then when we did when the LP came out, then I took the actual 2-track tapes and took them to the mastering engineer, and then he did a pretty proper job of mastering it for LP off of those. I mean, that's pretty much the highest fidelity you can get is a 2-track tape, reel to reel tape, and but it's still I don't know, it still didn't. Over the years, I was like, this still doesn't sound totally great. And I found the tapes again, and I found some other stuff that I'd kind of forgotten about. Some demo stuff that I had done, and just weird sound experiments. So I decided to remaster the whole thing myself and throw a couple of those on the end of it and stick it on the internet. So
that record is sublime. There's some really good songs on there. Again, I want to ask you about every song of yours, but I don't know if we have time for that. I would like to know every story behind every song, but we'll save that for another day, on or off record.
Sure.
But Lisa, the song, is that about your ex?
That's about the girl that I moved out here for, yeah.
Yeah. So you were together for, you said, a few years?
Yeah, like 5 years or something like that.
That's a beautiful song.
Lisa, show me how to make love.
How'd you get in touch with Birdman Records? How did all that go down?
David Katz Nelson saw us play at the Stork Club.
The Gris Gris?
Yeah, but I think we were calling it the Mirrors back then because I continued calling my band with Oscar and Joe the Mirrors for a while because I still had all these Mirrors LPs and I wanted to be able to sell them.
Yeah.
And and then Garrett from the Cuts gave him a CDR of Medicine Fuck Dream because it was completely finished at that point. And then he got a hold of me and said he wanted to release that, and then he wanted to release what he saw at the live show as well.
Yeah, I used to intern at Birdman. I told you that, and I found a lot of your music that way.
Yeah, Dave put it all out, and all my records up until the last two. Yeah.
The last Gris Gris record was the live record that was done here, live at the Creamery.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the name Gris Gris, was that, I mean, that's a voodoo term or like a reference to some kind of voodoo, and it's a French word.
Yeah, it's a New Orleans thing. I named it, the band's named after the first Dr. John album.
Yes, okay. I wanted to know if you knew about the Dr. John record.
Yeah, that was that was the whole
naming.
thing.
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
I loved that record and I thought it was a cool name.
Awesome.
So yeah.
Are there any talks of Gris Gris reunions?
No, there's not. Unless somebody wanted to give us a lot of money, I would do it again.
Okay.
But
are you still attached to those songs though that you wrote for the band?
Not really. I'm not really attached to very many of my old songs. I mean, it's when I first started writing songs and doing music. I mean, when listening to music back then, I never really listened to the words or what the songs were about in the music I was listening to. For the most part, and with most rock music or pop music, there's really not a lot to listen to anyways. There's not a lot of content there. So in writing, when I first started writing songs, it's it's just you learn how to play guitar, and then you have to. Well, I always wanted to write songs, and but you always think, okay, well, well, what the hell am I going to sing about? Because there has to
Yeah.
be vocals in this, you know. And the examples that I had in the music I liked was, you know, Nirvana, Sonic Youth, and then in old rock and roll and all that stuff. And it's just a bunch of nonsense, really, what they're saying, you know. So I wrote a bunch of nonsense, and that doesn't really hold up when it's just a guy and a guitar. If you're singing nonsense over something, and yeah, over time, you know, especially after Gris Gris, I started playing by myself a lot, and I just got more interested in actually conveying a real thought or a real story or a real feeling with music. And whereas I think a lot of that stuff that I did before, I got there every once in a while, but 9 times out of 10 I didn't. And that's why I don't really like those songs very much anymore. I thought that musically, I thought I did, you know, some pretty all right things, but the words were always kind of ridiculous. But some of those songs, you know, like Apple Pie and Genocide, I'll still sing that one. Yeah, a lot of the Gris Gris stuff. It's, I don't know. It's just like playing with words, but it doesn't mean anything. And so I don't know.
Yeah, that's very eye-opening and interesting to hear you say all that. Because, you know, in the Painted Garden record, you're singing about, you're telling stories. There's a lot of storytelling songs and
I think that's
personal songs.
That's the first that's the first record I did where I think the lyrics finally got to a different place that I worked a lot harder on it, and I actually tried to do something with that. I'm still really fond of that record. Everything before that is
And you were lost like a painted garden, starring in a movie. Getting high on a balcony, hanging from a string. Pick up your spoon, cook up your breakfast, and fish your king. Give up.
So from Painted Garden, you went over to do that Requiem Mass experimental album. What's the full title? Requiem Mass and Other Experiments.
yeah.
Okay. But that's like a different kind of album, but there seems to have been a gap, like a long extended gap between Painted Garden and the new record that just freshly came out.
That record was the culmination of everything that I'd been kind of working towards as far as writing songs and whatnot. And then so when that came out, I did those tours on it, and since it wasn't called a Gris Gris record, it didn't sell very well. The tours didn't go as well, and then that was around the time when Birdman kind of started, like the record label started to kind of run out of money. The publicist that was supposed to work on that record went crazy halfway through promoting the tour, and or whatever the fuck happened to her. And so the press for the album didn't, it didn't work. It just it fell off, and so. So essentially, once I'd finished all that, and it was, nobody heard the record, it wasn't promoted correctly, in my opinion, because of all that, and I just got kind of depressed and dejected, and so I just kind of gave up for a while, writing, on writing songs like that. And that's my own problem, but that's why I stopped for a while. And also, I always want to try to do something different. And I never want to force, like I wouldn't want to try to force myself to do another Gris Gris or another Painted Garden record
Yeah.
because it would just not be very good. And so when that didn't work out, that's when I just started recording people, and I was living here. And also the whole Requiem Mass record, that was something that I had promised myself that I wanted to do because an old girlfriend of mine, this girl Karen that I was dating in Texas, she died around 2005 of like a really, well, I guess it was a heroin overdose, but she wasn't a junkie, but it was like just a terrible accident. She was drunk and she took some heroin, and she's a very thin person in general, and it killed her. So I always promised myself that I would do this record for her, you know, a Requiem Mass. And so I started working on that when I moved in here. And so I'd been working on that since 2005, 2009 when I finished it. It came out in 2010.
Yeah, man, I'm sorry to hear
So-
that. I'm sorry for your loss.
Yeah, no,
even-
yeah. So that was just, you know, something that I promised myself I would do, and
Yeah.
it was kind of like a thing that now I'm going to do this. And then somewhat concurrently with that, I was writing songs, but more like one or two a year that were songs with vocals. And I just took a lot more time working on the words and the stories to them. And that's what ultimately ended up being the new record. But then also between the Requiem Mass record coming out and the new one, just for fun, I wanted to do that Leonard Cohen cover album.
Yes,
so then that
that's
was,
right.
That
Forgot
was
about that.
another thing I just did for the hell of it because I love that record, and I
Yeah.
thought that maybe there was some space to do something a little different than what was originally done.
You don't really hear too many singer-songwriters putting out, like, beyond playing it live or something, you know, like putting out this record that they absolutely adore and, like, giving it their own light, you know?
That's like I kind of think of it as like a remake or something.
Yeah,
like with,
but it's
like with
great. And
films or something. I don't
you're the
know.
guy to do it. And it
Thanks. When we put together the band to do it, I mean, I originally hoped that would have been something that I could have done a tour on and played
Yeah.
around a bunch. We only played one show with it, but then that, you know, that's like another tragedy. Right? I mean, Jay Bronzini, the drummer on it, killed himself like
oh, my God.
in December of 2011 or 2012. I don't know. It's been a couple years now. But yeah, so it was, you know, that was, but we hadn't been playing that for a while before that had happened. But yeah.
Well, the record sounds terrific. I mean, it's funny because the from what I know, the Death of a Ladies Man, the original album, had kind of like a haunted legacy in of itself with like Phil Spector's madness and
Right.
Leonard Cohen.
It's
like,
a cursed record.
Yeah, you know, and it's like Chris Strofolino told me at the Hotel Utah. He was like just kind of going off about it, and he's like, "Yeah, it's that album. It's the original album with all the fat trimmed off of it."
Yeah, that's what I always wanted to do with it. I've always loved that record, but yeah, just I mean, and that's the partially well, just because not only that is that record a little fun, which a lot of Leonard Cohen records aren't, but he's my favorite, you know, songwriter along with Hank Williams and Ray Davies. But it's the like I would never try to record any Leonard Cohen songs that were already done as well as they could have been done and produced as perfectly as they could have been. For
sure.
Which is, you know, like I would never go try to do Bird on a Wire or something. You just look like a dumbass, you know. But that one seemed to have a little space for somebody else to put in their 2 cents, you know.
Yeah, man. Okay, so you're kind of in this period of apathy, so to speak, or
yeah, that would be.
you're in this,
That
you're in
would
this
be correct.
rut, and you make this remarkable experimental album. Okay, and then you make Death of a Ladies Man. And I mean, what kind of inspired? What got you? Would you say this new record kind of got you out of this rut, or at least let you cope with it a little better? And What inspired it?
Well, a lot of it was just living in this place for so long in this neighborhood. The songs were written over the course of, maybe like 4 years.
So it was like
It was just whatever was going on in time, and then kind of what pushed me over the edge to finish it was not only just the fact that because I've been recording there's a bunch of different recordings of a lot of those songs that I've done over the course of those 4 years that I was working on them. But then starting to play with John and all of them, playing bass in their jazz band, and I'd finished finally enough songs to kind of know that I had a completed record and that it was all the stuff that I wanted to have put together for my next album, and I just re-recorded a bunch of it with them because they're such great musicians, and I knew that it would make it a cohesive thing to have those guys playing with me on all of it.
Sure. It has this like really kind of vaudevillian.
Well, yeah, it's the jazz band, right?
It's like, but like in the songs, it's like this like very theatrical kind of vaudevillian depression romp. No, and the lyrics are very powerful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
the lyrics are very like direct. They kind of bite at you. I mean, they're very. What are your two favorite songs on the album? Or I don't know. What's your favorite song on the record?
Maybe.
What do you enjoy playing the most?
My favorite one is Prisoner 1131267. That's the saxophone player who played all the saxophone on Requiem Mass and on the Leonard Cohen album, and he also played saxophone on the last song, but in a very strange way. Anyways, he's this guy Wallace who is a friend of mine, and okay, so December 2012. Me and Ye Ming went to New York City, and Wallace was out there, and he played saxophone for me on the gigs that I was playing. He lives in Oakland, but he'd travel a lot to to smuggle marijuana from California to the East Coast.
Okay.
And I don't know how much of this to say. I mean, he's already been convicted of these crimes. So anyway, we played the show with him. I don't see him for months after that, and I was recording another band of people that I knew him, and I asked them, "Have you heard from Wallace lately?" And they said, "Oh, you haven't heard? He's in prison in Pennsylvania." Wow. And I guess he had gotten arrested the day after we had played that show, and me and Ye Ming flew back to Oakland. He drove a car full of weed to Philadelphia, and he got pulled over. I don't really know the specifics of it, but yeah, so he's been in jail ever since then. He's getting out in October, most likely. I actually, on the last tour I did, I visited him in jail, which was a really weird experience to go to an actual penitentiary.
Yeah, was that your first time?
Yeah, I'd never been to prison, and I never knew anybody in prison, so.
Wow. On tour, no less.
So you're
crazy.
like hungover as shit, making sure you don't have any drugs in your pocket because you're about to walk into a prison. You don't want to end up in there with him,
You sweet crook in your prison of stone, play that old saxophone. Your solemn style now dressed down in orange, stuck in that new uniform. I'll see you next on a southern plain, October of 2014, or in the bowels of a honky-tonk, like an ad in some old magazine. Let's string up all the the masters. Never mind, I remember they never get caught.
I'm so glad you're playing with Jimmy Marks.
Yeah,
I've told you
he's
and him
incredible.
repeatedly, you know.
Yeah, we're-
Jimmy Marks of the Johnny Martyrs. Yeah, he's one of my favorite local drummers. He's such a great guy. So what you got coming up? Anything, any new projects, a new record you're working on?
Well, hopefully another John Brothers record later this year. Yeah, I'm working on a couple new songs, but it's slow going these days, so it might be another 5 years before I put out another record.
Oh, man, I hope sooner, but it'll make it that much better once it actually comes
Hopefully.
out. All right, so Greg's going to play us a song now. Why don't you tell us about the song you're going to play?
So this song's called Patterns of Days, and the music is written by John and Thatcher from John Brothers Piano Company. It's one of their songs, the only one of their songs I set words to it. I kind of used Thatcher's clarinet line as the vocal melody, and switched it around a little bit so it'd work as a song with words. But yeah, music by them, words by me. It's probably the song that's most about this place. All the shows and parties and yeah, good times you can't recall. You're losing your thoughts in the patterns of days. You've traded your dignity, your sanity, for good times. You can't recall any ways. Tomorrow night you'll do it over again. The party life repeats itself with a grin. Remember, you've got to quit to begin again. I'm thinking you're trapped in some pattern of life. Maybe you could change again, try to make amends. And sleep just might return to your nights. But not tonight. You'll do it over again. The party life repeats itself with a grin. Remember, you've got to quit before it does you in. Sunlight into your eyes. It's not the morning, it's the end of the night, and you're weary and low. Sadness comes to go with drunkenness, you know. Well, I see bottle of booze. It's not the happy hour, it's the hour of noon, and you're at it again. When your mood starts to sink, just pour yourself another drink.
That was great, man. Thank you so much for playing that.
Oh, thanks. Thank you.
And thanks for being on the show, Greg.
Yeah, of course.
That was Greg Ashley, and check out his newest record, Another Generation of Slaves. I am Mark Nelson, and you're listening to Checking In. We hope you enjoyed your stay.